This is a magic yodeling hat. Just to prove there's no magic, I can't yodel. We're honored today to have a guest with us. As you see, one of our sponsored missionary families, Seth and Alyssa Sander. I'm going to ask Seth to come up here. Maybe if he puts the hat on, it'll yodel. I don't know. But that kind of goes with the Hawaiian shirt theme, I think.
I think it fits you better.
There we go.
See you mowing the lawn with that.
I do need to mow my lawn today. You wouldn't want it back after I sweat in it, I'm sure. It's a nice wool hat. So without Seth's family answering, anybody know what flag that is? Austria. Okay, at least you know where our missionaries are from. Thank you. I'm not sure that was really a geography quiz there or what that was. So I was, last week I had Best Day of Your Life as I came up on stage, and all week I've been kind of stuck on, I was going to play 99 Red Balloons when you came up, which is German, not Austrian. And that's not really the best song to walk up to probably. So I was Googling famous musicians from Austria, like who are the famous musicians in the top 40 and the top 10, and this morning I was looking at the playlist, and of course it's all American music, and which connects to you being there, but I didn't realize this guy had become a musician.
Okay.
Hansi Hinterseer.
Okay.
He's like the John Tesh of Austria. And if I put up a picture, he's trying to be John Tesh, okay? He was an Olympic and World Cup skier when I was a kid, and now he's 70, and he sings, I won't say this right, Schlager?
Yeah,
Schlager, like fluffy folk pop music. And he has a great song called Viva Tirol.
Yeah, like
okay. Yeah.
Viva's not Austrian.
Right, but the second line is leader holes in the very barely covers your butt or your hind end. So that was inappropriate. I couldn't come up with any walk-up music for you, Seth. So
We got some Mozart.
Mozart, the famous musicians, number one, Haydn,
Yeah.
Mahler, Mozart,
Yeah.
and then like a lot of other classical musicians.
Yeah.
And then
Falco is kind of a famous kind of rocker.
sort of now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So that's as culturally relevant as we can get to Austria. But we're not here to talk about pop music in Austria, sort of.
do a seminar on pop music.
Right, with our series in the Psalms. But let me read Psalm 99 for a reason. Since 99 Red Balloons, Psalm 99, went that whole, you gotta, it's a dangerous place. Don't go in there. The Lord reigns, let the people tremble. He's enthroned between the cherubim, let the earth quake. The Lord is great in Zion. He's exalted above all the peoples. Let them praise your great and awe-inspiring name. He is holy. The mighty King loves justice. You have established fairness. You have administered justice and righteousness in Jacob. Exalt the Lord our God. Bow in worship at his footstool. He is holy. And then there's a stretch here where it goes back into their history of Moses and Aaron representing God. And it closes this way. Exalt the Lord our God. Bow in worship at his holy mountain. For the Lord our God is holy. And I was in Austria in 1988. So yeah, that's been a minute.
So you were like 2 at that point.
My mom was carrying me around in a backpack. There's 3 things that stand out. One is the religious culture of Austria, which we'll get to. Yeah. 2 is we were there to do sports ministry stuff, so we got to go to the Olympic sites on Kitzbühel, which is where Hansi was famous, by the way. So I was like super hyped by that. And talk about the ski jump if you've ever been to the top of that in a minute. And then if you're in Innsbruck, which Tirol, the area where you minister.
Our state, yeah.
In Innsbruck, if you look to the north, there's this incredible face. Just basically an extremely tall mountain, you're just looking at the face of it.
Yeah.
And that mountain protected Austria, protected Innsbruck during World War II, had a lot of other significance, but it's just one of those, when you read about the majesty of the mountains, I mean, I like Western America and, get to the Tetons. That's kind of cool, but like that's the vision I have is I could sit by the river in Innsbruck, the bridge, and eat pizza, which I did, and look at that mountain.
Yeah.
And I have that picture of God's majesty.
Yeah.
My one other thing before we get to serious conversation, and I didn't want to wear it today because it's going to be 96, but when I was in Austria in 1988, we went and had pizza by the river, and there was a T-shirt shop across. This is the old bridge, across the street, and they had the coolest T-shirts in the world. It said, "Austria, we don't have kangaroos." Do they still have those?
They still do have
Okay.
those, believe it or not.
Because about 10 or 12 years ago, Dr. Sharp and his wife were there, and they brought me one back. So I have a white sweatshirt that says, "Austria, we don't have kangaroos."
Yeah,
So
they're-
you've already learned something today if you were confused by that. Koala bears, also very scarce
No,
in Austria.
you got to go to the zoo in Vienna to
Yeah.
find anything like that. Yeah.
So, okay. So Seth Sander, wife Alyssa, and they're back there, a whole string. I was glad to see the boys come in with backpacks like true mountaineers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And why don't you tell us a little bit about your family, where you grew up,
Yeah.
and how we met.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that.
So down the road a ways in Seward, Nebraska is where I'm from. My parents actually here, so they're the ones that made me. And then my wife Alyssa was born in Gothenburg, Nebraska. Grew up in Wichita, Kansas then. And we met at Timberlake, which I just saw you representing right there. Timberlake Ranch Camps out by Central City. We now have 4 children, which I think they're all, I only see 3 of them, but I think one's
there.
laying
Yeah.
down. I think one's passed out. We have 4 children, ages 10, 9, 7, and 5. So you can imagine we've had a lot of fun times. Yeah, and then we got connected, I think, just through Pastor Kurt.
Mm-hmm.
He used to be here. I'm sure a lot of you know of him, Kurt Coddington and Joan. They just retired recently, but were pastors out at Hillcrest Free Church in Seward for about 15 or 20 years.
Yeah.
Quite a while. So my teenage years.
Yeah.
And they came and served with us in Austria one summer doing English camps. And they connected us to Jeff and then also Tara Sharp, who's now Tara Winterland.
Tara. When you say
Tara.
Winterland, you have to say Tara.
Tara.
It's Tara Sharp, but Tara. Yes.
Tara. She's changed her name once she moved to England. She and I worked at Timberlake together years ago. And she's the one that kind of connected us to Austria, and obviously there's a connection then kind of through all of us.
So how long have you been there? And just give us a big 30,000-foot picture of what the ministry looks like, which is like dumping marbles on the floor, I know. But-
Hey, my kids were just playing with marbles, so I have a good picture of
oh, good.
what that looks like. So we do youth ministry in Austria, help support the local churches. A lot of the churches there are very small, so like 30 or 40 people, and so they actually work together and do like a what is that called in English? Like parachurch, or what do you call that?
Yes, parachurch.
Parachurch ministry. So it's like maybe 6 or 7, 8 churches where the youth are all working together. So we help lead senior high youth group, and then we do camps, which we're trying to represent our English camps in the summers. We lead those, and then we have after school ministries where we're reaching out to the community. We have kids coming from all different backgrounds. And then we also do discipling. I just got involved last year and this year with coaching American football. And so I've gotten to connect to a lot of people in the community, and I'll also go into schools and get to connect also with a lot of my kids' friends. So those are kind of the main things. And then discipleship. My wife especially has discipled and walked along a lot of young mothers and young women in our community. So.
Yeah, and all of that is under the Evangelical Free Church, what we call ReachGlobal, which is our international mission arm. So they're in our house of missionaries. And also, how many years? What was the first year? You went part-time to start.
2013, and we were there for 19 months. And then we came back for 10 months and
Raised money. Yeah.
Transferred to long-term. And since then, we've been full-time. So it's
Awesome.
11 years total, basically.
Yeah. So in Innsbruck, which is kind of headquarters of what you're doing mostly in
Yeah.
that, like you said, Tyrol, which is the state or the region.
Yeah.
How many members on the team there? And then some of the, I'd like to hear a little bit later about the summer camp ministry, but we'll
Right.
talk about the,
Yeah, so actually our team has exploded in the last few years. Dave Osterhuus, which you know.
I've known
I think
Dave for like 28 years
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah. He's been doing camp ministry and youth ministry since he was a teenager, basically. I mean, he loves that stuff. So he's our team leader, and he's always looking for people to come do short-term or long-term. And so our team went from basically 3 couples to now we have 5 couples, I believe, and 2 individuals. One girl just came, and she's just doing a short-term thing, kind of seeing what it's like. And then we have 1 couple that just came as long-term. They had come also as short-term. So yeah, our team has grown a lot. Dave and Katrin, they're the team leaders. Their kids are now getting to adult age, which is wild. One of them is graduating high school. Another one has a couple years left, so they're going to be moving out. So our team is transitioning always in that case. We have a lot of young kids, as you can see, so that adds a dynamic. And then we have 2 single gals on our team. And that was Tara when she came. She was single and served on the Innsbruck team for a number of years before she met her husband and also moved and stuff. So
Yeah. So basically what you're saying is short-term missions is dangerous. This is, you started short-term. Tara went short-term.
Yeah.
Then became, okay, yeah, I'll work there. Then like all the camps globally for
Yeah.
ReachGlobal, now executive leadership with ReachGlobal.
Yeah.
So, if you got a child, you want to meet a spouse, send them on a short-term mission trip. Or if you're looking for a new career, go on a short-term mission trip. Or
It
if
could
you want to
be.
learn a new language and
Yeah, it
all
could
kinds
be.
of challenges, go on a short-term mission trip.
yeah, man.
Let's talk a little bit about the culture, specifically in Austria, but Europe in general, spiritually. I mean, why can't the churches just do it? Why? I mean, besides being small.
Right. That's what we're kind of always talking through as a team. Really, every year we have team retreats and we look at our vision and we look at the future and the past in the local church. And they're still not at a place in Austria where they're able to support the ministries that they want to do, or even the local church. We actually just had, at our local church, we have about 40 people, and we just had hired a pastor for the first time in a long time. And he was a missionary from Brazil, and things just didn't work out well. And they left, and they're probably going back to Brazil now, and kind of left our church in a little bit of a hard situation. And that just seems to be the situation in a lot of churches, where they kind of get to a point where it's like, okay, we're ready to have some more stable leadership, and then something happens, culturally, things don't work out. And so our goal and our vision is we don't want to necessarily be leading everything in Austria, but we want to be supporting stuff and helping, the discipleship stuff, like what my wife's been doing. We see young women that she's been in a relationship with for 10 years who are now, stable individuals leading ministries in Innsbruck. We know youth that have gone through our camps, gone through our youth groups, who are now leading ministries in Innsbruck and in Austria. And Dave, our team leader, who's been there for decades, he gets to see people all over Austria who are now themselves leading ministries. And so we're trying to get to a point where everything is Austrian-led, and it's not to that point yet. The youth team, senior high youth team, which is a multi-church youth group, I actually ended up leading that team last year because we didn't have anybody who was willing to take it over. And then Dave and Katrin had to take over the middle school youth group because nobody was there to take it over. And so you work for years to build up leaders, and then sometimes they don't stay very long. And so that's kind of the struggle.
Yeah,
And you had asked about
just the general culture, religious culture in Europe and Austria, specifically in Innsbruck. Where are the children, the youth that you're working with, the young kids, where are they at in terms of believing in a God, or what society is telling them about hope and
So it's interesting. I definitely think the fastest growing religion is Islam in our area. We have a lot of Muslims that go to the schools with our kids, very diverse neighborhood. And so that seems to be the religion that's growing the fastest, partly because they just have a lot of children compared to Austrians. The state religion is still Catholicism, but a lot of that, if I talk to my neighbors, that's more just like, oh yeah, I go there for a wedding or a funeral. But other than that, like, there's really not a deep connection to the Catholic faith. And that's not everybody, obviously. But unfortunately, just that as years go by, those people and their actual walk with God is becoming less and less, and it's more just like a state religion where, it's a Catholic country in name, but not necessarily in practice. So a lot of the young people, they've distanced themselves from the church. There's a lot of agnostics. There's a lot of looking into Eastern, like, mysticism. There's an idea, even talking to my neighbor downstairs, like, I take a little bit of this, a little bit of that, like, kind of a stew full of different religions, like that coexist bumper sticker kind of idea. I like a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and I'll kind of make my own path to God. So there's a lot of that too, which is interesting, but also very difficult when you're talking with people, because it's like, how do we navigate this a little bit, because it's just so jumbled.
Yeah. You mentioned Muslim faith, Islam being the growing, not long ago when Ukraine exploded and a lot of things were going on. We can talk about this, right? It's on YouTube.
Yeah.
This is before we shut the internet off. Tell us a little bit about a couple of your adventures you had there, and how did you get involved in being the hands and feet of Jesus in the middle of that crisis?
Yeah, so initially with the Ukraine war that broke out, I had a friend of mine who was always involved in humanitarian efforts. He asked me if I would go with him. This is like in March of 2022, the very start of the war. Asked if I would go with him to drive to Ukraine and pick up some families with disabilities who basically couldn't get out on their own and needed somebody to come pick them up. And so we went up there with a few vans, picked up a number of families, drove them back to Austria to a safe spot. So went through all the checkpoints and the borders and stuff. That was wild. Couldn't really communicate with them. But we're able to bring them to a safe location. And then since then, we had just kind of been looking out for, okay, how is there local ministries or things that we can get connected to that are helping these Ukrainians. And my wife got a connection to an orphanage just right outside of Innsbruck, where they had brought, I think initially there was like 100 kids or something, orphans from Ukraine. And so she had connected to the people kind of leading up those houses, non-Christian workers, just social workers. And because of our relationship and the trust that was built, and we got to even, take some of those kids to the zoo and do little, outings with them and stuff, they really trusted us. And then they saw we were doing camp ministry, and so they started sending some of their kids to our camp. And I think, and she was just talking about this yesterday, I think we've had 190 kids come to our camps the last couple of years from Ukraine.
Yeah.
So it's been a continual thing. We have one girl now that comes to our church, and then she also has brought her mom a few times. Her dad is still in Ukraine. And she's been involved in our tutoring ministry as one of our helpers. She comes to the youth group. Yeah. She's become a believer and is just, on fire, and is such a connector. She's always bringing people and connecting. And so there's so many things that have opened because of that kind of just initial connection we had and the heart that God has kind of placed in us. And my wife, if you talk to her after church, she's got lots of stories. But this year, again, we had, I think, 12 Ukrainians come to camp.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay. We're going to delve into camp, but I need all the kids to listen real carefully right now, because he just mentioned talking to them after church, and I happen to know that they have candy.
It's true. We brought some Austrian kind of sour, chewy candy. It's over on that table back there. So grab some. I'll refill if needed.
So one of the main ministries, that's why Tara at the time went there.
Tara.
I have to translate in my head from English to English. Why Tara went originally was this, what used to just be a seasonal opportunity for short-term missions called English language camps.
Yeah.
What does that look like on a daily basis? And the reason, just so you all know I'm asking this, because some of y'all need to go and help.
Yeah, amen.
Some of y'all.
Yes.
We want to know what you guys are doing. It's great. We sponsor you to be reaching Austria, and now Ukraine has come to Austria.
Yeah.
You're doing international ministry through the tool that God already opened up 30-some years ago.
Yeah.
When Bruce went over there and started this crazy thing about, like, teach them how to be an American. I don't know. It's not really that. But English language camps.
Yeah.
Is it still called that? What's the
Yeah. So we call them English camp.
English camp? Okay.
The main tool obviously we use is English. In Europe, the ability to speak English is very highly valued. In school, they're learning English at a pretty young age now. Sometimes even, I have a friend of mine, he speaks multiple languages, but he's also a native English speaker, and he just goes to kindergartens and hangs out with kids and speaks English to them. And so it's becoming a thing where it's like if you offer native English, is that how you'd say it?
Sure.
Yeah. If you offer like English as a native speaker, you're already attracting a lot of people. And so we basically do like Timberlake. You kind of do a normal camp kind of schedule. We do swimming, we do hiking, we do sports. But then we have people like you guys come over and partner with us. So then we have people who are speaking English at a native basis, and they can just hang out with these kids, and through conversation the kids get better at English, but then they also get to know Jesus through the actions and the interactions of all the Christian workers.
Yeah.
So we've had, like I mentioned before, Pastor Kurt has come and spoke at camp. Pastor Jeff is going to come sometime and speak at camp. We have opportunities for people to come cook at camp, and then obviously be cabin leaders, where you lead a group of teenagers throughout the week and get to pour into their lives.
Yeah. So they're running a summer camp for the purpose of spreading the gospel. The hook is English.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be a theologian or a doctorate, although Cheryl, I think you could help with the grammar. And the kids would have trouble keeping up with her too. But so that's one part of the ministry. You talked about after-school tutoring and the relationship building that just in the community. Talk a little bit about your after-school program also.
Yeah. So most of our ministries, we're always trying to like build bridges, basically, from just the general community to the church, and kind of benefit the church in reaching out. And so we do after-school tutoring program where kids can come, and for it's a small fee, and basically this fee is just so they are committed, and so we don't have kids just coming and going, and we have no idea. And we have kids from the community that come, and we help them with math, English, and German, and then they can also hang out and play games, and they don't just do homework. It's also a lot of fun time, cooking together. We baked cookies a lot of times last year. And stuff like that. And then we have foosball and a lot of games, and it's just a time to kind of connect with those kids. A lot of those kids, their parents might be working, or they have a single parent household. We just had a kid come from Turkey, didn't know the language at all. His mom had passed away recently, so his dad was there, kind of overwhelmed, trying to connect to the culture. So his son started coming to us, and just immediately, built a connection, and always wanted to come, and was there, every moment possible. So we get a lot of kids from different backgrounds, especially because we're helping with German. We get a lot of foreigners come, and such is a cool cool way to connect to the community, where we're again providing something they need, But also, Lord willing, and it happens over and over again, we get to a conversation where we get to tell them about why we're doing it. We get to pray for them and all those kind of things. But it's not a Christian ministry in the sense that they need to believe any certain thing to come, or they need to be associated with a church or anything. We don't really have any Christian kids at this point. So it's a really cool opportunity to connect. And then invite to English camps. We have had kids, even this year, that came then to our English camps. And then that's kind of the next step.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Awesome. So if somebody, a family or an individual wanted to come over, maybe let's just go seasonally. What would they do? How could they help you guys? How could they come along and encourage what is happening for the kingdom of God in Austria?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the main thing, kind of what we touched on, was our English camp ministry is kind of set up to have short-term, to be a short-term missions trip. And so you would come for 3 weeks, you get a week to kind of acclimate. We do some training, we prepare for camp and what it's going to be like. And then we have pretty intense 2 weeks of camp with a break in between, obviously. But so that's kind of a great opportunity, really, for anybody. As long as you're at least 18, you can come and be a counselor. And if you have a relationship with Jesus. And then there's also opportunities to cook. We've had people come. If there's a retreat we have in February, it's only a 3-day retreat, but a friend of mine came once and cooked for us. So there is smaller opportunities throughout the year, but the main thing is that English camp in July, and that's from usually July 2nd or 3rd through the 20th or 23rd, something like that, depending on when school gets out. Mm-hmm. So it's like those 3 weeks, start of July to end of July. And we can provide any information needed about that. There's also, I think I mentioned that, opportunity to cook. And then you don't necessarily need to be 18. This year we had a couple grandparents, and they brought their granddaughter, who was only 15, but they all cooked together for us. So if you have younger, teens, that's an opportunity for them to still serve and be involved.
Nice. One of the amazing opportunities, I think, that you guys have been involved in is just that on the street, the lighthouse or the whatever, relationship building.
Yeah.
And let me just reverse that a little bit. From the heart of a missionary, and you can say this, and your mom and dad are in the audience. So what's it like to be on the other side of the world from your family, to forsake that, to leave that? Any lonely moments? Any times I missed that hyper-salted McDonald's burger or whatever?
There is that. It's funny, the first few days when we get back to the States, it's like, oh, we need to go to Chick-fil-A, we need to go to Chipotle, we need to go get Reese's or whatever. And
you don't have Reese's?
We've started to get Reese's.
Okay.
We started to get Reese's.
I'm not coming.
We don't have peanut butter M&Ms. We don't have some of the
Suffering
other
for
good
Jesus.
stuff. Butterfinger, man. There's some good stuff. But then after the first few days of being back in the States, and it's like, okay, this is good. We need to slow down. That is probably the most difficult thing, is being away from family. Time, it's not a lie that time just goes by like this, and we're gone for a year or two, and we come back and everybody's changed a bit, all my nieces and nephews are growing, sometimes taller than me, or getting to be young adults. My parents, my dad has had some health scares the last few years, and those kind of things, you begin to think about, okay, is this really worth it? God, is this really where you want us to be, thousands of miles away, where we can't just, run home for the weekend and stay with family? So it's something we're constantly struggling with, constantly praying about and talking about. That's the main reason we try to come back as often as possible, which also with 4 kids is a lot for them to deal with, a lot for us to deal with. It's obviously not cheap to fly back and forth, but it's kind of that thing we decided if we're going to stay in Austria full time, we need to make every effort possible to still connect with family, because it's very important to both of us. We both have really big families. We both have families we care about. And then our church communities and our friends and everything else. Like it is a little bit different. And when you have holidays and it's Christmas time and you're seeing everyone is together and we're not with them, that can be hard.
Yeah.
For sure. And then just also in the faith aspect, not having, there's a certain comfort level of just being with, I'm blessed to have a Christian family, blessed to have grown up in a good Christian community here in Nebraska, and not having that in times where you just need to lean on somebody. We do have people, but it is a little different. Yeah.
I just want people to see real life with the Sander family. We're not going into great detail, but we were talking, it's been a few years since they've been back, and your kids are young enough that they kind of don't remember this weird place and this weird guy and whatever, but, we've been praying. They've had health issues. Certainly COVID was harder where you were than where we are.
Yeah.
A lot of things like that where we would just, hey, family, can I, or we would reach out and, you've been prayed for through all of those things, and that's my advertisement at this point, to make sure that you are getting communicated from Seth and Alyssa, and it's not something that, because of all the communities they're involved in, it's kind of a closed list. So you got to ask to be on it, right? We don't share Facebook posts and stuff like that. So I encourage you today, as a congregation as well, to remember to pray, not just for Seth and Alyssa, for all of our missionaries, but especially today we have this opportunity to have you guys in town, and grateful for that. Maybe just if you could preach for 5 minutes to Geneva Evangelical Free Church, here's your shot. What has God been teaching you lately? What's He laying on your heart for the church and for missions, and specifically, how many of us need to book tickets for next year?
Well, I can't decide that, but we have probably about 20 spots right now for people next year. We've been encouraged actually with connections we've made. My home church down the road at Hillcrest, they've been sending people the last few years. We've had different churches, connections through Minnesota where they've sent people. I will say,
we tried to send them a couple this summer, and they had too many volunteers at English camp. They were full for the first time in however many years it's been running.
Especially, it was pretty incredible, especially for male leaders. We have usually a really hard time getting enough counselors. And this year, we're really blessed to have people earlier, so... Yeah, so the sooner, if God has laid something like that on your heart, the sooner you take action, the better, really. That's kind of how it was for us. And that's where I think God showed me this summer I got to work with Dave, our team leader, really closely. We hadn't been working together during camp ministry for a long time because we usually lead separate camps. We got to work really closely together. And I think it was cool for me to see somebody who, he's a little bit older than me. He's got a lot more experience, and just see, hey, there's not I've had this experience a lot, that youth ministry becomes something that as you get, you settle down, you have a family, maybe you move on to other things. I know a lot of my friends that started out in youth ministry, they moved on then
Quitters,
to...
we call them,
you can say
that's the polite way to say it.
But I don't know, just to see my team leader, Dave, and for me to be able to kind of aspire to, he is still investing in the lives of young people. And of course, when you first start out in your early 20s, you're kind of still buddy-buddy with high schoolers. And then as you become older, like him, he's able to be like a parent figure to them. And to see that's for me personally, hey, God, I don't know how long you're going to have us here, but I see no matter what my age is and no matter where I'm at in life, you're going to continue using me. And, now as my kids have a lot of friends and I get to be involved in football and get to be involved in volleyball and different sports like that, Like that's my encouragement to a lot of you guys. What has God given you? What is your interest? Or what are your kids' interests? And that is basically the easiest, in my opinion, the easiest way to connect to the community, to connect to your neighbors, connect to the people around you. We had the opportunity this year as the European Cup for football, soccer. And that
Real
just happened. And soccer in Europe is huge. So it's kind of basically like American football here for us. And everybody, is interested. And Austria was actually pretty good this year. So we use that as an opportunity to invite our neighbors, our non-believing neighbors to come over. Hey, we're going to watch the soccer game at 6 p.m. We'll have some snacks. Come on over. And so we got to connect and yell together and be disappointed together or whatever, and just use that as a connection. And that's my encouragement, and that's what I think God has been teaching me over the years, and also getting to look at people like Dave as an example. Hey, what kind of things are either in my hand? I love sports. Okay, I can use that to connect to the community. I can use that to encourage young people by building relationships. There's a soccer World Cup or Europe Cup going on right now. Hey, I know there's a lot of people that like watching that. Let's invite our community, let's get together. Last year, we were able to do a grill party with our entire apartment building. Not everybody was able to come, but we had a lot of people come, and just things like that. Okay, how can we use something that I enjoy and that others enjoy to build relationship and build community? And then we get into conversation. We get to pray for people. We get to know people well enough that they're vulnerable with us and share when they're going through health issues, to get to share when they have family issues. And then it's like this open doorway to speak into their life and get to pray for them. And that's been a lot of my experiences is what's that connection we can make with these people, and then where does God want to bring it from that point on? And so a lot of my neighbors that I've gotten to pray with or gotten to just sit and we have a picnic with them or whatever, it's happened because we invited them for a soccer game or invited them over for a cup of coffee or whatever. So I think just that's my encouragement, and that's what God keeps laying on my heart. After COVID, it was a little hard to get back into that rhythm. I'm not going to lie. It's like, okay, can we, invite our elderly neighbor over again? Yeah. There's a lot of caution and stuff like that. And should we get together with so many people and things like that? And then just God reminding us, no, this is what I've placed in you, and this is the desires I've given you. Don't miss those. Some of our closest friends now, they're a Muslim family. They are even more sport fanatic than we are. They're always hiking, football, volleyball, whatever. And so getting to connect with them through that. And they're, like I said, they're Muslims. Their kids came to us and wanted to come to church with us. And so they came to church with us right before the summer, which is wild because they have no interest in Christianity in that sense. But because they know us, they're like, oh, you're safe. We trust you guys. Your kids seem to love church. Why don't we send our kids?
Try that out.
Yeah, and then, the husband is always asking me questions about faith and why do we believe this, and what, like when Easter was happening, he was asking all these questions, like, what is Easter? What actually happened with this? Even though he grew up in a Catholic country,
Yeah.
And so just seeing, for me, the encouragement for you guys is, what are your interests? It doesn't matter what it is, in my opinion. What are the tools God's given you? Maybe you can mow lawns for your neighbors with this hat on. Yeah. Go around town, get your lederhosen. I'll mow your lawn for free.
They call those the little marionette things.
Yeah, whatever you want to do.
Be a puppet. Yeah, awesome. So have you been to the top of the ski jump at Kitzbühel?
In Kitzbühel, no. In
Okay.
Innsbruck, I have. It's actually funny. We went to Kitzbühel this summer with our camp because our new location is right outside of Kitzbühel.
Yeah.
So we've been there a few times, but we haven't been to the ski jump there. We've been to the one in Innsbruck.
You have to Google this, okay? So this is my childhood, mid-'70s, Olympics, Innsbruck, Kitzbühel, ski jump. And you go all the way to the top, and Of course, we were there on an athletic thing, so they run an elevator, but we were not allowed. We had to walk.
You had to hike?
I don't remember what it was, hundreds and hundreds of steps to the top. When you get to the top, there's a sign. You look from the top of the ski jump down a ski jump. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's a big ramp with a lip at the end, and then you land on a really steep slope. But if you're standing at the top of the ski jump in Kitzbühel, you look down and you see the Olympic rings, this big set of metal painted rings. But if you look through those, you're looking at a Catholic basilica with a cemetery. Like right through the Olympic rings to the cemetery. And the sign in 7 different languages says that only fools and heroes take the next step. I've never forgotten that. Like, it takes risk.
Yeah.
It takes risk to go and do what's required. Now, I don't know that anybody ever died, but to me, it's like there's a cemetery in your view when you're standing there looking at, you know, you're going to be an Olympic champion or you're going to end up at the basilica. The other part of that is that basilica is like 800 years old.
Yeah.
Still standing there. And like, hey, we added on 8 years ago. So, just connecting to what you just said, that what your interests are, to focus those in, to build those bridges, to build those relationships. And it might be a little risky, but probably won't put you in a cemetery. So that was the point of the story, Eric. Okay. I wasn't going to do this, but if your family wouldn't be too embarrassed, can we get your whole family up here just so we can see them and pray for them? And I'm going to have the elders that are here pray, and I'll pray, but if you elders would come and if the worship team would come, we're going to close our service. But I'm going to ask you as a congregation to stand, and we'll get all the Sander family. Mom and Dad could come too if they wanted to, Grandpa and Grandma. Because we made a commitment to these guys a decade ago, and we're keeping it by God's grace. But the biggest part of this commitment is that they are our partners. Come on, a little bit more this way so we're all in the camera. You guys are going to be on the internet, famous, right? There you go. I like the vest. I think the hat goes with the vest, actually. Well,
He's got his hat collection.
he does. Let's pray. Gracious God, we thank you for Seth and Alyssa and the kids, for their families here and the churches that sponsor them, including this one, that have sent them to be faithful, and for their faithfulness in following your call. And it's as simple, as Seth was just saying, as seeing what doors, what interests you're blessing, what you're opening. Father, help us to continue to support them financially and in prayer, and maybe even in presence, that some would feel called to go and partner with them on site and have their heart expanded for the world in a place that has a history of knowing you. But in a world that is increasingly turning away from you, I thank you for these lights, for these bridge builders. So we pray for health, we pray for safety, we pray for your blessing on the Sander family, every one of them. In Jesus' name, amen.